Good morning, everyone. How are we doing?
Very good.
Rich Pyszczek here. Rich Newberg here. We're the Rich and Rich Show with our sidekick Heidi. And we have Don Wildman over here who has been helping us out with some stuff behind the scenes. So we are talking about news archives as a first rough draft of history. And one of the things we're looking at is our Buffalo Black History Showcase. So that's who we are. Edward Charles Brandy was, he's in training for Buffalo schools. We're expecting him here pretty soon. He, him and myself have worked with Rich on producing, well, you produce them, we kind of integrate them and insert them into the social studies curriculum from grades K through 12. That's what I do for the Buffalo schools. I handle all the, not me personally, but I am one of the people that handles the K through 12 social studies curriculum because there's been a lot of changes in the social studies curricula since this New York State social studies framework have been released in 2014, 2015. So it takes a lot to get people out of their old habits into new habits. And we found that even when the people were in colleges talking, teaching, they were still using the old 96 standards, 1996 standards. So how did this project come about? I got a phone call one day from Heidi who said, hey, I want you to meet this guy. He has these videos that you can use in your classroom. Heidi and I were trying to figure out last night, did or how we met. It was somewhere, but we've known each other for probably close to 10 years or so, maybe longer. And I said, sure, yeah, I'll meet. So we met, and I go in the room, and Heidi's got this nice little office out by the airport. I go in, I see Rich Newberg there. Now, Rich Newberg is famous in Buffalo because he's been on TV for how many years?
37.
Only 37. So I go in, I'm like, hey, you're Rich Newberg. He's like, yeah. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. And I said, I met you years ago in this event. We talked, we started laughing about it. And I said, what are you doing? He was like, I'm here to meet some teacher in Buffalo about using my videos. I'm like, well, I'm your guy, and let's figure out how we can do this. So we have a lot of groups collaborating on this. It's not just Rich and I, it's not just Heidi, it's a whole group. And you'll see in our presentation, you know, the old axiom, it takes a village. Well, this is more than a village. This is a bunch of villages. This is something we can do in the whole state. And Don last night was saying, why don't we do this like Cleveland and other places when we can? I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the goal. So what we're going to do is have Rich talk about how we've done some of these projects, because we had these, 20, 50-minute videos, and we carved them down into smaller, digestible chunks.
Right.
And that's really where they're using the classroom, because you don't want something for 20 or 50 minutes just to give to a teacher, say, here's something you can use. You want to target it, be more specific, get it more on a granular level, so they'll actually use it. And my job is to make it easier for people to use the resources that they're given. And if I can make it easier, if someone can say to me, hey, Rich, I didn't know this, or this is something I can use now, my job is done. I mean, I can walk out that day knowing I did some good for some people. So we're going to show you where these resources are located and how they fit into the framework, social studies framework, which is another way to say social studies standards. Ooh. So here in the video, I'm not sure why it's not showing up, is a hour-long special that you can watch at your leisure. But again, we have all the links in our presentation on the page. It talks about Rich's 1 hour, it's a 1 hour journey. So how you did 1 hour of TV for 37 years, I'll never know, because it's pretty impossible to do that. But this was a piece that Rich did. It's kind of like a swan song, and his Channel 4, the CBS affiliate, let him do an hour of that. And then you had another hour special retrospective, which it won.
I'll talk about it.
Yeah, which won the local Emmy. So, you know, it's the work we're doing, and the work he's done, and the work we're doing now in the classrooms is well received. People love it. People are craving it, actually. I get people all the time asking me about, hey, what's he working on next? I mean, he'll tell you how many field trips he's got. His wife was talking about last night how many dig at the house. So it's a lot. We got to find a spot for him to put that. So we have the Buffalo Black History Proof of Concept, which we're going to see that video here in a minute. Why does it work? We'll talk about that. What is next? And we have some other opportunities that we are looking at. We have the Erie Canal Bicentennial in 2025. Rich has a lot of those field tapes. We have Holocaust and Genocide education. And we have the American and New York State 250th, where Don and myself are working with that with the Public History Trust and working on that with the State Commission and Don's working with the American Commission, or the A250 Commission, has done some work there. So this is kind of where we're going to walk you through for the next few minutes here. And Rich, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Rich.
No problem.
Let me begin by saying that racism has always been among the top concerns for me as a journalist. Having come of age during the height of the civil rights movement in the 60s, I grew up watching CBS and saw how TV news coverage of social injustice could help bring about positive social change. So as a young kid, I was kind of struck by all this. Murrow, of course, was one of my childhood heroes. I learned something about storytelling. Lucky for me, Rod Serling was my visiting professor at Ithaca College. And his Twilight Zone storylines always delivered a strong moral message for those old enough to remember the Twilight Zone. And dealing with the darker side of the human condition really got my interest because I used to think about it as a teenager. At Michigan State, I got my master's in news and public affairs. My mentor, Professor Tom Baldwin, the late Tom Baldwin, insisted that whatever career path we would take and whatever stories that we might chase, the content has to be relevant. Relevant, that was kind of the byword of the 60s. I never forgot that lesson. And now, with the help of my colleagues on the panel, my co-producer Tom Vetter, and Enlightened Management, most importantly, Enlightened Management at WIVB, the CBS station in Buffalo, where I spent 37 years as an anchor, senior correspondent, and documentarian, I'm now able to select the most relevant segments of my social issue reporting and repurpose it for the classroom. I'm a strong proponent of tapping into the archives of local commercial television news stations as a means of teaching history to students. As it's been said, local reporters provide their communities, as Rich said, with the first rough draft of history. We're out there every single day, and we're tapped into the community and the issues. The Buffalo Broadcasters Association, and Heidi's going to talk a little bit more about this later, has all three network affiliates agreeing to allow their film and videotape archives to be digitized for educational use. Back in the 60s, the Buffalo Historical Society convinced the stations to allow it to store the daily news film that really was being thrown into the dumpster every week. They just said, it's old news, who cares about it? Since then, that living archive has been rescued time and time again by veteran broadcast journalists in Buffalo who knew the importance intuitively of preserving our moving image history. The Association of Moving Image Archivists, AMIA, has for decades been trying to convince local commercial TV stations to share their film and video archives with their communities, but it has not been an easy sell. News departments are more concerned with advancing the big stories of the day as opposed to taking time to retrieve old footage in old formats that need to be digitized. It's costly. And today's technology, of course, allows stations to report breaking news as it unfolds. So this is the priority. The ratings cover breaking news. The big companies that own these television stations are interested in monetizing the archival footage. And sometimes they charge commercial interests thousands of dollars per minute. And I've been able to demonstrate to WIVB and Nexstar, the giant owner of the station, and many stations, that free educational use of its video not only boosts the station's image in the market, it also provides the news departments with digitized archival footage that can be easily accessed for deeper coverage of important and ongoing social issues. As a member of AMIA's News, Documentary, and Television Committee, I hope the success of our Buffalo efforts will help the association achieve its goals. And of course, the New York Public History Trust, under the direction of Don Wildman, also knows the value of the moving image to make history come alive in the classroom, especially given the short attention span of students today. And Don is a great storyteller. We had a wonderful meeting last night. And 23 seasons of mysteries?
Something like that.
23 seasons. Amazing. brings to mind the quote of Mark Twain that truth is stranger than fiction. The time has come for us now to teach truth to students in a compelling way, especially in this period of civil unrest and deep divisions within our country that threaten our basic freedoms. Back in 1999, when I created the documentary unit at WIVB, one of our first projects featured Buffalo's storied role in the civil rights movement. Inner city students were unaware that history had been made in their own neighborhoods. And it was an African-American photographer at Channel 4, Don Dawkins, as you'll see in the second video we're going to show, who approached me and said, he dumped about 11 field tapes on my desk. He had been shooting Underground Railroad sites all over Buffalo, and he knows that I was a student of the Holocaust. I've wrestled with the Holocaust ever since I was a little boy. He said, you know, what the Holocaust is to you, slavery is to me. Would you collaborate with me? We did a 3-part series. It turned into 6 or 7 major documentaries over a period of years. And that's where I drew my segments from for the classroom. That's the history of how it came about. We visited authentic Underground Railroad sites, presented the plight of enslaved people seeking freedom in a new light, talked about their courage, incredible. It's just students never learn this. I never learned this. We highlighted some of the great local civil rights leaders in Buffalo who rose to national prominence, helping to create the Niagara movement, for example. At the same time, we took a deep and unblinking look at inner city poverty and crime in Buffalo, segregated neighborhoods and schools, and the race riots of the 60s that occurred when frustrations boiled over in so many cities, including Buffalo. I was able to get archival footage of that, and it really, I've used it 100 times in my reporting. Following the Black Lives Matter demonstrations that turned violent in Buffalo, I began producing an hour special, as Rich mentioned. We called it The Buffalo Story, History Happens Here. And we called the opening segment In Pursuit of Racial Justice. The documentary won 2 New York Emmys, including one for public service. We were up against New York City. The piece finished first in its time slot on WIVB, which never really happens with a documentary when you're up against network programming. It illustrated just how valuable archival news footage can be to a community searching for answers in our modern era. So I'd like to show you a short piece I put together that addresses the need to teach truth to students, just how powerful TV news footage can be to accomplish that end in a compelling way. And I borrowed the title for this little piece from that first segment of the Buffalo Story. So if we can play that.
Sure. That reminds me, I gotta get my picture taken with Jeremy. How about that? Let's see here, over there. All right. And it is this one here, I believe, Mr. Picasso?
Yes.
As we in Buffalo know only too well, there are forces at work seeking to destroy all the good that has come out of the civil rights movement.
Our city will never be the same. It was a moment that changed our community forever.
On May 14th, 2022, a self-avowed white supremacist took the lives of 10 innocent people at one of the only grocery stores serving Buffalo's inner city residents.
The evil did come to Buffalo. It's come to all too many places. Manifesting gunmen who massacred innocent people in the name of hateful, perverse ideology, rooted in fear and racism.
We need justice in this country. We need history. We need people to learn the truth about history, learn the truth, so we can treat each other the way we're supposed to treat each other.
The civil rights movement has some of its earliest roots here in Buffalo. Yet today, our city is one of the most segregated in the country. How we deal with the truth in our pursuit of racial justice could once again set an example for the nation, where change doesn't come easy. It doesn't come easy in Buffalo either, but now We have a real opportunity to make a difference through education.
We owe it to those who lost their lives in a senseless massacre. And we owe it to ourselves, because no matter what color you are, or what your belief system happens to be, the truth, as it is said, will set you free.
And we all run now.
We know that we're oppressed. We know that this is a system that oppresses us.
As an African American individual, Black female, I do understand why some protesters may feel that they're still, or we as Black people are still oppressed, because to some extent we are. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
Y'all can call me Hamilton. See, I'll be the leader of this here outfit. I'm going across this here swamp by and by. If I not say to duck, y'all got to duck. If I say to get low, you best to get low.
These Buffalo fourth graders are learning something about the courage of escaping slaves from the South and those who came to their aid as they passed through Western New York on their way to freedom in Canada.
I'm on this journey to freedom, and our hands up yonder, it's a big old house that's gonna help me get some fresh clothes and maybe a little food as I continue on.
History is coming alive in a way that no textbook could ever express.
I'm looking for this woman. Which one of you's Harriet Tubman? Speak up!
By viewing this archival piece of local television history donated by WIVB-TV, these young students are able to feel the fears, hopes, and dreams of the freedom seekers.
I want you to think of a character trait that you might be able to describe Harriet and all of her accomplishments with.
She really cared and was confident of risking her life after, even if there was after.
Might have been maybe a little hard for her because she had to lead a bunch of people out of the slavery, and she didn't want to get caught by boundary hunters.
They are even learning that some of Harriet Tubman's descendants settled in Buffalo.
Growing up, the only people who really knew about Harriet Tubman was her family.
Well, that we live in a place where such a mark of history was.
You understand that this is where it happened, and just be quiet and feel what it's been like to walk in here.
To see it framed in these documentaries is wonderful because it's a great correlation between the students and this community, because now they say, wow, this actually happened in our own neighborhood, in our community.
The Buffalo champion of civil rights is given her rightful place in American history.
History will record this day and make the truth stand tall.
As a teaching tool, it's fantastic. It has a direct connection to our actual curriculum and content, not only globally, but locally in Buffalo. Most importantly for these, the youth that we have now that we're working with daily, to see that direct correlation and impact that it had within Buffalo and what the advocacy was at that point in time, and to carry that legacy on to move forward.
When local television documentaries and news archives are opened up to teachers, a window to local, state, and national moving image history opens up to their students.
The Black Ghetto of Buffalo, New York, erupted in violent rebellion.
Negroes, they treat them like they're animals, but talk to them like they're animals.
Buffalo Public Schools are unconstitutionally segregated.
For these 9 and 10-year-old students at School 61, the age-appropriate lesson on this day deals with positive role models.
What kind of character traits might you say that Mr. Eve portrays?
Arthur Eve, a former state lawmaker from Buffalo, who fought hard all his life for civil rights and came close to becoming Buffalo's first African-American mayor in 1977.
People of goodwill will vote for candidate regardless of race, color, or creed.
And on this day, these children would actually get to meet the living civil rights legend whose story they watched unfold in class. School 61 is also known as the Arthur O. Eve School of Distinction.
He was determined to end segregation, and the other one was that he was a leader because he led the civil rights movement.
So what did he see when he looked into their faces?
I see all absolutely. We will get there. And there's no question in my mind that if we keep working hard, we will succeed.
Your series brings the heroes from Buffalo, from New York State, in live action for the children. I think it's a very key part of their education.
People who cannot remember their past are condemned to repeat it. We're not going back that way.
Can you hear it okay?
Yeah.
That was quite a day. Having Art Eve in that classroom, the school's named after him, and the kids just really got a great sense of who he was. And the fact that their own neighborhoods, these things transpired over years. We would
Sure.
get into that next.
We're there about less than 4 minutes or so for 10 o'clock. But we can maybe go over a little bit if you guys don't mind, because we can do a Q&A at the last 10. So,
You want to show this?
do you want to show this? It's up to you.
Well, I want Heidi
Yeah.
to be able to.
Definitely. So I will put that down, and I'm going to put this back
Yeah,
up.
Heidi, come on up and just share a little bit of how this, how we're doing statewide. The camera's up here, so you got to
That's
sit in
okay.
my seat. Go ahead.
I'm okay. They can hear me. I'm good. So we're an intimate group. I'm Heidi Ziemer. I work with the Western New York Library Resources Council. And council, there's 9 of these across the state. They are a consortia of libraries, public school, academic, hospital, and special libraries. And together, the councils got together and created this portal for digital collections called New York Heritage. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it or used it.
And it's right here, the link. So all these will be there for you to take a look, even the studio audience or the people watching online. All these links are there. And this is how Heidi and I got together. And she was great to organize all this for us.
So the councils are very actively collecting materials from the member libraries to be digitized and put up on New York Heritage to share with people. But it was more, I guess, in my view, it's one thing to put the collections up, it's another thing to get people to actively know about and use them. And so that is why when Rich and the Buffalo broadcasters had come to us to find out how they could get their material digitized and became members of the council, got this stuff up there, I saw this as a unique kind of format of material that people would be interested in, especially relevant to today, because it occurred to me that students today do not really watch television news. It's kind of like, the back in the day, when my dad used to talk about the radio shows that he listened to, and I didn't listen to radio in the same way that he listened to radio to get news. And I think kids today really don't understand about television news and how people got the information and learned the things they did So this is a way to, through social media, through these different platforms, to bring that kind of historical perspective to younger students and to talk to them about investigative journalism and what that means. They don't really get an opportunity to see much of that anymore. There's really not a lot of investigative journalism like there used to be. So to me, the purpose of these collections is to get them out there for people to use and to use them in ways that meet them where they are. And so putting Rich Pyszczek in connection with Rich Newberg, the guy who has the students with the guy who had the material, that to me is the purpose for New York Heritage, is to make sure that we know people are using this material that is so valuable to the libraries and archives and museums across New York.
And it's bringing in a new medium, because I'm looking right through here, and we walked up through the library here. A lot of the primary source material, a lot of the material we work with as historians is written words on pages. Nothing wrong with that. But we're also in 2024, sad to say, getting close to 2025, there's a lot of video primary source material that this gentleman has curated over a 37-year career that is just as useful, and it is what the kids are accustomed to seeing. So this is kind of like the new frontier in primary source and education, and we're at the ground floor of it. We are the pioneers of it. There's no one else who does what you do, what we have done, that
and
we know of.
The next step is going to be the fact the station has allowed me to digitize my 237 field tapes, not mine, but everybody who went into these documentaries, turn that digitized material over to the students so they can create their own documentaries. And previously in your wonderful presentation, details of how ordinary people leading ordinary lives react during extraordinary events. You're doing basically all what we do as journalists. You're out there trying to find out, tap into our communities. And now these young students are realizing that, oh my God, in my backyard, these great people came about. The Pan American Exposition is a whole different story. We're going to close with one more small piece that goes a little bit deeper into what these segments represent for the students.
So this is a teacher's, educator's guide that Heidi and I have looked at, and we can tell you, where something is, like off the top of our head. We're so immersed in it. So we have this document, all this stuff is presented, and you'll be able to, at the conference website, we submit this all to the conference organizers. So we'll be able to see this, and in the videos we see today, you'll be able to see as well to revisit them. And our next steps is we're looking for awareness, developing, implementation, all of these different things. Going to conferences. We've been to Baltimore for a conference with the EMEA conference. We were at the New York State Social Studies conference. We were asked to be at this one. So we go around and talk about this, but it's still very new for a lot of people. And here are some of the partners that we've worked with on this that Heidi has said. There's a lot of us out there. There's a lot of people that are invested in this work. And it's great work to be doing. And then what we'll do is we'll see the last video here, and we'll then take questions for both of our sessions.
A little bit louder. Hello, I'm Rich Newberg. There's a saying that goes, minute by minute, hour by hour. If we lose our history, we lose our power.
Almost feel the kindred spirits of those that pass through going to freedom.
Buffalo's African American history offers powerful lessons to all who view it.
All of a sudden I was engulfed by this history. We have so much history here that people don't even know about.
Growing up, the only people who really knew about Harryville was their family.
Lessons that deal with the struggle for civil rights and what can be accomplished when people of goodwill band together for the common good.
Hope, that's the main thing. Hope.
you know, the chains are going to be broken. I'm going to be set free. I'm going to be my own.
They might be sad, and they might be wondering where my dad, where they at, what's going to happen to them.
This history, spanning 2 centuries, has been documented by WIVB-TV in Buffalo through television specials. They trace the African American experience from the days of the Underground Railroad, when the road to freedom wound through western New York, to the efforts to fight the stereotyping that went on along the midway of the great Pan-American Exposition in Buffalo at the turn of the 20th century, to the Niagara movement that followed, which then led to the creation of the NAACP.
The abolition of all distinctions based on race, recognition of basic principles of human brotherhood.
Really was the beginning of nonviolent, self-including civil rights movement. We began in 1960. About 100 years ago.
And it was at the Colored Musicians Club in Buffalo where people of all colors gathered to hear some of the country's greatest jazz musicians jam into the early morning hours.
And that's our music. That's the black jazz music is jazz.
There is an African American proverb that says, if we stand tall, it is because we stand on the shoulders of many ancestors. As history is brought to life in this collection of teachable moments in the classroom, students will be introduced to Buffalo's African American human rights pioneers whose struggle for equality laid the foundation for the modern civil rights movement.
Mary Talbert was a woman ahead of her times. She was a woman of courage and incredible vision.
Racism, poverty, and crime in the inner city, and economic and educational inequality are issues still being confronted to this very day, and they need to be addressed in the classroom.
They've got to be able to read. Reading is the first step towards freedom, justice, and equality.
We have moved forward, but we haven't taken that journey yet. But it is within our reach.
During my 37 years at Channel 4, I was privileged to have had the opportunity to co-produce these Black History specials with reporter Milas Hairston and a team of gifted videographers who capture the human spirit through the lens of their cameras. Tom Vetter is one of them and is co-producing the video segments for this project. The creator of these specials, the late TV news photographer Don Dawkins, believed the time was right to bring this history to life so new generations might be compelled to build on the lessons it provides. Teachers, please explore this collection and choose for your students the material you believe might pique their interest, and at best, challenge them to follow the examples of the visionaries who came before them, those whose actions led to victories over bigotry, ignorance, and indifference. Thank you for your interest.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed.
And what we did with Black History can be done with so many different subjects. The ones that are plaguing our country today, and we got to get kids to really start becoming engaged and critically think about this kind of content and how it applies. We have to reach out, as Rich has always said, reach out to touch them in their own cultural heritage and their own experiences in their own communities. And it's the local television news stations. You know, public TV has done a great job, but public television, of course, and what Don has done nationally with Museum, it piques the interest of the kids, but sometimes that comes from a national perspective down. This is from your community, based on your archives, up. and how we relate to the national issues today, based on our own experiences. So that's been the bottom line, and I'll tell you, it's been very rewarding for me to continue what got me interested in journalism in the first place, to be able to contribute to a new way to approach students. So I consider myself very lucky that I've got people who believe in what we're doing.
And I do.
Thank you.
Any questions for our session or the session that was just before us? We'll do a Q&A.
A quick question. Rich, how many, not equivalent, but large-sized local news stations are there throughout New York State?
Oh my gosh, I would say every city has at least the three network affiliates.
So Rochester, Binghamton.
Yeah,
they
ABC,
all-
CBS, NBC.
Oh, Myra has.
They're owned by Scripps, by Nexstar, and
Is this conversation you've started here, is that being had with others as well? or-
well, AMIA, as I mentioned, has for decades been trying to get stations to open up their archives, and they don't have the time, they don't have the interest. General managers are concerned with ratings, with advancing the current stories, and we know how valuable archival material is. Other future generations are going to build on what we're able to keep.
Yeah.
And so every market has what you need. Is a person like myself who's invested. I'm from Long Island originally, outside New York, Elmont, and I found a wonderful life, and my wife is a Buffalo native, and we have a wonderful family. So Buffalo's been great to me. I fell in love with its history. My grandfather, after World War I, he was a Manhattanite, and he was engaged to my grandmother, and he fell in love with Buffalo, wanted to make a life there. And she said, "No, you're coming back. It's too cold. It's beaver country. You're not going to stay in Buffalo." So anyway, he loved it. I love it. The circle is complete, and whatever I can contribute. But to your point, Don, if there are broadcasters associations or universities, we need to tap into the local archives and draw out those stories that will be relevant to these kids. That's the challenge.
And it's the cost factor of getting them to do that archival work.
Digitizing can cost $60 a 3/4 inch tape, which is deteriorating by the day. We went back to try to get Jim Kelly's stuff from the Bills, and it dissolved in the machine, it disintegrated. But if you heat it up properly and treat it properly, you can retrieve that footage. $60 a tape. We have 3,000 tapes, 3/4 inch tapes. This is after film, which holds up. So there are 9,000 tapes in these stations.
So IVB owned your stuff, but they allowed you to take
They
this.
gave us the licensing rights.
I see.
And there's
That's a replication process that has to be done.
Yes, it is.
The scaling, we have to scale it out.
And fair use, by the way, fair use allows educators to use material. So there's a legal argument that can be lodged when stations are reluctant. And we've never had to go to court, thank God. The broadcasters have finessed something beautiful. And what I'm trying to do on my end. So I think this is a movement I think that the New York Trust can really, History Trust can really take this concept, help the Association of Moving and Archivists, but accomplish what your goals are now, and really start getting the state to wake up to this thing.
Beautiful work.
Thank you.
I have a question. You're starting with Southern history with Harriet Tubman. Have you considered doing an introduction that speaks to New York's 200 years of enslavement before you get to that time period?
It's a wonderful thought, and right now I've got so many projects that I'm trying to develop. It's a wonderful thought.
If someone helped produce it for you, would you consider
Oh, absolutely.
tapping it into, because archaeology right now in your area, even on Grand Island, is showing the presence of a maroon community. So there's a lot of
Oh my gosh.
history there, and we keep starting with the Southern story. Yet we're getting ready to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the ending of legal slavery here.
Absolutely.
That people still are unaware of. So that would be a great bridge.
And that would be another platform where New York Heritage comes in.
Right.
Because the New York Historical Society, I know, has done a lot with the New York enslavement story. And
We're doing it right all over the state. I mean,
Right.
It's happening all over the state, and a lot is happening there.
But they had brought some of those collections into New York Heritage, so what I'm saying is like, that might be a way to link throughout the state what, what other people are discovering and share it that way. The other thing with New York Heritage is that when Rich wanted to put the film in there, they had to sign an agreement because everything has to be freely accessible. There can't be any paywalls on any collections that are in New York Heritage. And that was kind of a back and forth. Finally, we got the language that they were good with, but.
I have a question about the television archives and field tapes. And what I was curious about is when you speak of field tapes, are these essentially the broadcast programs, or do they also include raw footage?
Field tapes are the raw footage used to gather, the storytelling video and the interviews that you use to put together a piece. And traditionally, no station would ever allow any field tape. It's like a reporter's notes. And as a matter of fact, sometimes I'll do 10 different takes on a stand-up. Just like that. And it's a little embarrassing to have students watch me go through my stand-ups 5 or 10 times. But it's worth that to get this footage into their hands, because they can see how news was. It covers many disciplines also. How was news covered 37 years ago or 20 years ago as opposed to today? And there's one more element. Mike Frisch has developed a technique in Buffalo to allow students to take a transcript, and given the counter times of those field tapes, which have been digitized, they can go right to the source of the subject matter they're seeking. So he can produce what would you call it, Heidi, a guide for these kids, so they don't have to wade through 1,000 sheets for 200 tapes. They can go right to the source of what they want and find out exactly where it is on which tape. And so today's amazing techniques, modern techniques for accessing material. It's amazing.
So my secondary question about archives is if the television stations are reticent of sharing these archives because they're focused on current events and ratings. I mean, what do they usually maintain? Like, why do they maintain their archive at all? How do they use it?
They don't.
They don't.
Well,
they don't.
So why do they keep it at all?
Well, some stations don't. Some stations don't. Buffalo, all 3 stations in Buffalo, for some reason, respected the history, respected their work, and they've either archived their newscasts, which Channel 7 does. Irv Weinstein was unbelievable, as an anchorman, and his legacy is preserved through their newscasts. We put the actual piece in the archive with natural sound to track, so kids could, they can take the natural sound of a piece and create their own documentary.
It wasn't actually the broadcast stations that saved, it was the broadcasters.
Yes. Well, the broadcasters rescued the film.
Rescued it.
But the stations have kept their 3/4-inch tapes and beta tapes.
But the stations wouldn't use them in any other way.
It's so hard now for them to send someone in the basement, go through the tapes, digitize the material, bring it up. Meanwhile, they got a new newscast at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock news.
There's a whole industry of buying archives like this. I mean, it's just,
There is, but you know what? I mean, it's important that the stations realize, for their community's sake and for the kind of projects we're working on, they have to at least turn those tapes over so they can be digitized, but we have to find the resources to do it.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. No question? Okay.
I had a question for these guys.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we took up a lot of time.
One, you have a website